Hey, Michelle, how are you? Okay, so we will see if other people will be able to join us today. Hi, Ghislaine, how are you? Okay, sorry, I just posted the assignment, and I think we should have time today to talk about OpenVAS. I think we were having issues. Okay, good. All right, let's take a look at your notes. Now, before we start, I want to let you know that I will not be able to be doing lab live on Wednesday. I have a program advisory meeting on Wednesday. So my intention is I will have the lab recorded for you, and then I will be available after the meeting in case you have questions. So you know, if you have questions or concern or issues, let me know via message. And if I need to, I'll log on and help you. So let's take a look at, and then I will release the quiz and the project stuff tonight and tomorrow. Sorry, I had my wisdom teeth pulled, and so I was down like the whole weekend. I couldn't even do anything. So let me share screen and we will take a look at the notes and the assignment. I was able to get OpenVAS to work. And so if you are having issues with that, we can take a look at it near the end of the class today. Okay, so let me get my assignment open and the notes. So in this week, we are going to cover, hi, Jarrell. Glad you could join us. We are going to cover application assessment and what we can use in Python to be able to assess code or scripts or application. Okay. And in the past 2 weeks, we've touched on vulnerability scanners. In this week, we are going to look at the type of tools that we can use in Python to assess applications. But at the same time, we have to be mindful of their security issues, as we know that no tool is perfect. So to start, we can look into a number of tools. So the authors pointed out that you do have libraries and functions built in Python that you can use to assess script and or code, especially when you deal with Python-based type of application. Pickle is a library that is used to serialize and deserialize of objects. So it's used for storing files. And I put a link here for you to find Pickle. Let me see if I still have that open. It will take you to here. Now notice that they have a warning here, and it says that Pickle module is not secure. It is used to execute arbitrary code during unpickling. And consider if you are using Pickle, you need to use HMAC to ensure that it has not been tampered with. And HMAC uses hash. So we want to compare hash to make sure that the file has integrity. The safer serialization format, such as JSON, may be more appropriate if you are processing untrusted data. So when you're working with untrusted data, you want to import JSON and use JSON to work with untrusted data. Okay, so the link provided take you to Pickle information. And then eval is a method that we can implement, and this is a function, but it does have security issues. So let me see if I do have, maybe I don't have that open. Try to open all the website that we would need. So in Python library, you can look at evals, and evals have globals and locals dictionaries that uses. So with this, throughout the chapter, it talks about how we should safely use eval. The parameters for this needs to be evaluated and validated. Okay. So when you're using eval function, we want to make sure that we have proper validations for input. So in the first question, let me zoom in a little bit. It asks you, why is input and output validation validation important in program scripts development? And anytime that you have some form of input where the user would input into the field, it could be their personal information or comments, we want to make sure that we control that field to, number one, clean up the data that's going to come in through that application. Second, we want to make sure that we validate so we can reduce the vulnerability in the program. And doing that, we would prevent the attackers from injecting malicious scripts. So in the case where you do see some interface that would have fields that control the number of characters that you can input, so we don't want a very long script to be added to that field. And so they can run the script to, put a backdoor in your application, to brute force your authentication, to do some kind of injection for the code. So that will be malicious script that will come in through the input field. So we want to sanitize and validate to reduce the risk of malicious script being injected. And in using eval, there's some example in the chapter that it touches on how we can validate using eval functions and other tools. And ultimately, when you validate data that's coming in from the input and sanitize the data, you are really creating filters of what needs to be safe, or what is safe and what is fair, so you don't jeopardize the application performance and integrity. Okay, so that allows, now validation and sanitation sometimes can slow down the response of the application, so we want to make sure that we're mindful of that. So part of your security task in application assessment or web application assessment is to make sure that validation and sanitation is in place, even when you didn't create those applications. So when you are assessing the infrastructure, the development side of the house will have systems that are either in testing or already rolled live, meaning that they're using the system for their operation. So our job is to come in and take a look at those applications and make sure that those applications are secure. And an area of security is to make sure that we validate and sanitize the data that's coming in from the input, or even the data that's going to generate as output. So when we're using eval function or method to evaluate code, and they say that use this with care, we should restrict on what is defined as globals and locals to really control the input and validate the input of the sources and its return values. So in the documentation, it talks about eval using globals and locals dictionaries. So we would then implement the rules to restrict, right, how these globals and locals are used. Any question? So today I want to focus on these tools, and I know at the end of the chapter it touches on Flask as a framework, which bleeds into chapter 11. So we will emphasize a little bit more on the framework and how Flask is used with the application in the next round, in next week. Okay, so now let's come back to here. Okay. Another method that you would see is to use Subprocess, and I think we touched on this at the beginning of the semester. Subprocess is used to spawn new processes, and so when you're writing an application or you're working with an application that use multi-processes, right? We can use Subprocess to spawn. So when you assess, what you need to do is because it is insecure, we want to also check the arguments that is being passed into this particular method. As an attacker or a malicious user can use this to connect to different input and output devices by spawning additional processes as well. Then a library that is often used in application assessment is a mktemp. This allows us to make temporary files and directories. This is also insecure, as temporary files can be used for malicious intention. So the next section here talks about input and output validation, as we touched on. It is important, it is critical in application that we validate and sanitize, because if without that, input can cause up to 75% of vulnerability in an application. Okay. So in injection, they simply just add the script to the field, and with that, it can issue certain commands to compromise the system or disable the system or open up other security areas for malicious purposes. So when you're using something like this, this is an argument that's used in a for loop with the OS module. Okay. To really mitigate some of the attack, what we can do is we can apply the filter to verify or remove the malicious code by validating what is being used. So using the structure like this, what we can simply do is to validate what that file is, okay, by confirming what that file name should be. So we can simply check for the file by file name, and we added the if conditions to be able to validate that that file, which is in a form of input, is acceptable. And this is just one example. You can use it for other things like user input. But let's say that you want the user to upload a file. So we want to make sure that we can check for file size, or we can check for the type of file or the file name. So that way, not every file can be uploaded and be used, because executables can be uploaded and that can it can cause disruption in our system. It can also launch malware and other things. So we can just simply do input validation like this. And then in the question 3, it asks about eval. You can find eval example here on the bottom of page 1 and going into page 2. So when we don't put a limit in the input, malicious code can be added. So that will load into the interpreter and it can be ran. So in the example here, you can see that OS module is used, okay? And we have try and accept statement. So with the OS module, we can have the system clear, print the module, and handle the exception, and then print the exception in the case that it comes across error. So to improve it, we need to really define what is going to be our local and our global. And while it is not being recommended for code evaluation, you can use it if it is validated, as your input is validated. So another way that we can use this with eval would be like this, okay? So we're going to import in regular expression library. And through regular expression, we can detect a certain pattern for the user input. So we can set the rules on what the regular pattern would be. So if you want the user to input in their phone number, right, you can set a certain type of digits that you want to accept and how long are those digits. So it would eliminate the option for that field to be injected with a long script or anything longer than a certain number of phone digits. So regular expression can be implemented, and then we can use eval method here to really eliminate anything that would look like a suspicious Python code. So the question asks, when antivirus software flags and quarantines a malicious program, it is scanning for a specific pattern in the code, or how does it work? So a lot of times the application like anti-malware or security application has signature, which are definitions of what a malicious code would be. So when it detects, like for example, if it's detecting a certain type of Trojan, it's because it has that specific signature that's stored in its database. So that application has a database that contains the signature or the behavior of a certain application that would be malicious. Now, as you know, there are 60% of known malware or less that's defined based on signature for what we know in the wild. The other 40 to 50% we don't know. So on an intuitive application and a security application that would have anything that would be irregular outside of the norm. So yes, they would specify the rules on what is acceptable, and anything that's outside of that application behavior that is not acceptable, then it will flag it as an irregular application where it could be malicious. So it will block it. Okay, so that's another way that they can implement to really detect anything that would suspect to be a malware but doesn't have a definition or a signature. And I hope that answered your question. So as you know, that malware, is born every day and it changes in the wild, right, over time. But historically, if you have malware that is spawned from another malware, for example, right, the original signature would give you what a different version of it would be. Yeah. So there are also malware that's not detected by your antivirus, right? Antivirus is only effective to a certain percent. We still don't have the complete, we can't address the unknown area. So if we rely 100% on the antivirus software, then we're not fully safe. It is only safeguarding to a certain extent. And so it's really going to rely on the user judgment and decision on, the type of application, website, files that they access, download, and visit, then that would really, elevate the safeguard a little bit more. So there also needs to be a human factor in this area. Okay. And we can't remove that completely because, things quickly change so fast. And then often that you would see malware happens to people that they don't know, right? That is a malware, or they're not educated in the area of security. So, teaching people how to safely use the system is important. So in this example, we can see that we can use eval with regular expression to really set up on what is going to be the Python code, right? If the pattern would match that, right, it would evaluate that. And then we can have it print out to something that we can acknowledge that, it is Python code. Or sometimes we can even we can set the parameters on what the user can enter. For example, like social security number, right? As they enter it, we want to convert that into symbols and then store what they actually entered into an encrypted area of the database. And then we can make sure that it's only a certain number of digits, and using hyphens or however you want the user to really type that in. So, and the cleaner your data comes in, the better that it will store on the database, so we don't have to clean it up as much. And that's one area. The second area is to really prevent other intentions, that is, how the data can be changed into malicious code as it is injected into the system. Okay. And this has always been one of the challenges that we have as organizations use a wide variety of applications. Some of it is legacy that has flaws, that has known vulnerability, or use services and protocols that has known vulnerability. And then, having an application that have backdoor, or, other issues that comes along with application, native or web, needs to be assessed. So insecurity is not just about assessing network connectivity and protecting the connection, from one system to the next, but it's really about how we give a more, in-depth solutions in how the application is used and created, and so on. Okay, so on pickle here, right? Pickle is used with binary protocols that has known flaws. It is used to store anything that doesn't require database or temporary data. So pickle that's its main purpose, right? To really serialize a list of objects into a file. So we can take those things and put it into a file. Now, an example of a script that uses pickle is like this. We would import in pickle. We would have a list, right? And that list could be strings. And then we would take that and then we would put it into a file. Okay, and here's like a dump method here. Okay, so it would take that list and then bring the components of that list in, the elements of the list, into a file. Now, the challenge with pickle is that you have no control over the integrity of the data, okay? Because it's coming from the list and it's putting it to a file. So when you bring it into a file, you don't really have control unless you are really looking at specific object inside that list and applying the rules to those objects. But then you would see how the performance level would go down. Then there's no control over the data size, right? Or the system limitation using that library. Your code is then being evaluated without security control. The string is encoded and decoded without verification. So there is no mechanism for us to really validate or verify what those strings are. Now, the suggestion is that when you're using Pickle, you can increase security if you're doing application assessment by using the OS module and YAML. And so in this case, we are using all three libraries. We're recording a user input. And as they input, we want to take their input and we wanted to put it into a file. So we're going to load the content of the input into a file. Now then we have to write additional statement to really check to see if that file is exploited. Okay. So if the content is then being evaluated through YAML, so if it is exploited, then it's going to notify us. Okay. But I think even though this is still a very reactive approach, so when you're assessing application, you're really looking for existing issues. So it is not a proactive, right? It is really reactive. And then you have to fix the existing problem. So if you look to use Pickle to assess, right, then you would have to implement YAML or some sort of security mechanism to check to see if what you're loading into the file is safe. Okay, so there are many different ways that we can use these things with security in mind. Okay, so in the YAML, there's a method called safe load. And safe load allows you to check what's passed into the parameter here. Okay, so it's going to look at the content so that way we can use it with more security. And YAML is just a way that we also we can parse things. A lot of the times it's like encoding and decoding what was input, so we can parse it into what you see as a file. So in the next question, we can say that, oops, sorry, I scrolled down too far. We can say that the purpose of Pickle is it's used to store things that do not require database or temporary data by using binary protocols. Alternative to Pickle, there are a few methods that are available in Python that we can use to prevent malicious code execution in dictionaries, such as chroot and sandbox. So you can allow it to funnel back to your root directory and be able to check what's in that root directory before it executes. Any question with Pickle? And so you might see various examples online regarding Pickle, right? How people use Pickle. And so here in this particular chapter, the author only addressed on how Pickle is used in vulnerability assessment or application assessment. And, you know, with the flaws from these modules, because they are insecure, we have to use them carefully. Any question? So in the next part, it shows you an example of how chroot is used to prevent execution on the root folder. I forgot to separate these lines as I took the code from the script, but you can definitely download this. Sorry. All right, it should look like that actually. So we are going to import in OS module. We're going to import in pickle. We are going to import in context manager from context lib. We define a class. We have the function defined here, and we're going to return to the OS. We have a decorator in that we are going to define this method for context manager. And we are going to use chroot to yield the serialization. So in the shellcode object here, we're going to use the shell system chroot. And if it is exploited, then it's not going to allow that exploit code to run. Okay, so we bring it back to the root directory. And so if it is exploited, then it's not going to run. Okay, but we have to implement, we have to define on how it's going to serialize it. So when you deserialize it, that means that it's just going to decode what was stored and then be able to evaluate that. Okay. So if it is not exploited, then it's going to deserialize it as shellcode, and so it can run in shell. Because if you don't do that, what will happen is if it is an exploited code, then it can still run, because at this point, right, we don't set any rules if we don't let the system understand that it is an exploited code. Okay. So that's one example on how chroot is used. We want to prevent malicious code from being executed at the root folder or directory. So to expand further for the subprocess, in subprocess, the example that the author shows is used with the call method. So subprocess can access command directly. So we can use call to execute a certain command. So for the subprocess, I think there's a missing P here, .call. What we can do is we can look at how the format for that command would be. So this is the parameter that you need to make sure that it's in place. Okay, so I see. It is a decorator around generator. Yes. For this right here. So it is a container of the pickle object. Is it the temporary address? Yes. So for your pickle object, right? It's going to create a temporary location. That is correct. And so if it is executing, if it is a safe shell code, then it's going to bring it over to the root directory. So you are not completely transferring everything over to the root directory at first. So that is correct. Okay, so shellcode is made safe by context manager, which contains chroot. If if you specify, right? Because here, when you dump this over, when you return it, it's still gonna need to, yeah. So when you deserialize, so let's say that we don't know what this code is, okay? Then it needs to use the chroot method to load that and verify, okay? If it is a safe code, then it would deserialize it. So if it is just shell code, then it would deserialize it. But if it is not safe, then it will not bring it over to chroot. On this one, they don't have the error printed, but if it is not deserialized, no, because I think that to really implement this, you can probably implement try and accept, right? But this is just one example. So on this one, it either runs or not run, right? It won't show anything. So if you want for it to show, then you have to implement the exception handling with that. Okay, so for subprocess, an important area that we want to pay attention to would be our parameters. Okay, so if you click on this right here, you can see the consideration for subprocess, the security. So as you go through and read the documentation, okay, it goes into how subprocess can be used. So subprocess can be used to access command or low-level commands directly. Okay, and here it talks about how we need to put shell faults. Why do we need to do that? Because if you don't put this, things can be ran in shell that can cause issues or security issues to your system. So when you put shell faults value, the command is executed as a list. Okay. With shell true, the command is executed as a character string. So that's two different areas. So when you put it as a false, it's going to put it into a container and execute it. Whereas if you put it as true, the command that you state in the parameter is going to be executed as a string. And in a command line, things are entered as string and then it's parsed in at the low level to decode that and then parse to convert that to a type of function. So that means that when you want to have a certain input, at the shell level, we want to put it into a list, okay, where it would need to use it as an element of the list when it's calling that command. Okay, so here we see the example from subprocess import call, and we're going to use the call to execute this command ls, right? So if we define our subprocess call with the command and we put shell false, with that, this is then being placed into a list like this. So we want to use it as a list. So therefore, you would see the square brace on the outside like this. Okay. Now for your SCD out, so here it talks about how we can have the file object open is read mode and the input parameter in the script is read. For your shell's parameter, the most important areas is to really validate the command to avoid the vulnerability of the shell injection. Because in shell injection, if we have it available and parse it as a string, they're gonna be able to execute the command. Okay, because the command can be, you know, opening files, or it could be accessing IOs, and so on. And so that would be associated with the risk for piping the command in the shell. Okay, so all that is just going to remove the risk in your shell injection. So an example that the book used is the ping command. And in the ping command, we first would have the subprocess, right? We define our method and its parameter. And then we would have the command arguments that will be ping, and then our additional details with ping. So we're going to do a ping count of 1, and our target is my server. And here we would return the subprocess with popen. So we're going to execute the command with popen. And we want to put in the parameter shell false so we can prevent shell injection. So that means that it's only going to be executing the ping count 1 and their target my server without any additional execution, or the command cannot be modified. Okay. So then after that, it's going to show that it's pinging the address or the target. Okay, any question? So for 6, we can say that when using subprocess module, we should consider shell parameters to validate the command and avoid vulnerability associated with shell injection. So the list cannot be added to. So yes, it can be added to, but it cannot be modified. So this list is not in string, right? It needs to convert this into the string in order to execute, because your command line can only understand what string as the input. So the whole point in this is to make sure that your command and its options are going to be together as a list. In order to change the command, I have to iterate through the list and convert this to another command. So in the case of the attack, right, if I know that the person that created the script is using this, I cannot directly inject into the shell, right? I have to find ways to modify the script itself. So I have to access it with the higher programming level instead of the low machine instruction level. Because in a shell injection, it directly accesses the command in the shell, not at the list level. Okay, so then I have to change my tactic on how I would attack that, right? Will you completely remove security by doing this? No, right? Like you said, somebody can modify your list, okay? But we can prevent ways for our script to be tampered with. So when you put this in a list this way, it is a 1 command with the appropriate options and parameters. Yep, you're welcome. So in order to change this, I have to change the content of the list. Okay. Instead of just running shell injection. So another module that you would use with input would be shlex or shlex. Lex stands for lexicon. So would it be possible or safer to use a tuple? I think the way that because it's only going to accept the list. So what you're passing in here is going to be, hold on one second. Let me go back and take a look at what they standard in, standard out. I think it's only accepting a list though. Can you make it into a tuple? They use arguments. Yeah, I think because popen only accept lists. So when you define, okay, let's go back here. When you define the list here, right? This is being passed into your popen, which is your class, right? So this object is now passed into this class, which is used to, as a property of the subprocess. So, and popen accepts only lists. So I don't think that you can use tuple. We can attempt to run it, but I think based on their documentation, because it shows it here, right? By default, it uses the arguments inside the container as a list. And because string is a list itself, right? So it is actually a nested list inside a list. It's a list of characters. Yeah, so I don't think you can use the tuple. It doesn't really talk about, yeah, because every time that you see popen, you see how they're using the list, and then inside it you would have the command like ifconfig. And then the std out will be your pipe. So std out would be your pipe. Your std in would also be the pipe. Writable stream objects to by open. Reading for the stream provides child subprocess the attribute for none. For the error, I think it's just the method, the member method for that class only accept a certain parameter. I'm pretty sure of that. Okay, so escape input, or this can also be used for sanitizers to use shlex or shlex module in Python. You can import in the quote for, in this example, they import in quote for shlex, and then we would then specify the file name, right, and what we want to do with that, okay, the commands. So we can use it to access files, we can use it to show the content of the file, and also the appropriate commands and its pipe falling. Okay, so in the number 7, it asks you, when using subprocess.call method, how can an application avoid risks associated with piping commands to the shell? We want to make sure that we define the parameter shell is false, and that would be nested in the method. And then for 8, the module that we would use for escape input, that would be your shlex module. So if we explore this a little bit more, let me see, I did put a link here for you. So lexical analysis is a way that we can analyze, right, in Linux shell for running control of your files, for the applications, and so on. So using this, you do see that it shares some of the similar method to what other module, but it tells you here that quote function is not guaranteed to be correct in complement of the shells from other OSs such as Windows. So it is only pertaining to Unix, because in Windows system, it might use different commands compared to Unix and Linux. So executing command quoted by this module on such shells can open up the possibility of command injection vulnerability. So when you're using the quote function from this module, there is a chance that it can be injected at the shell level. So therefore, right, if you're using subprocess call or run, we want to make sure that our parameter shell is false. So you need to pass the argument that is shell is false. And as you look at some of the example there, they also show you how you can use this, right, the quote with the commands, or similar to what you've seen in the book. And this is not written as like a script. It's actually you run this in the shell so you can see the output. Like this example, right, you would use quote and then file name, and then you would print out what the command is. So the command is lsl, right? And then for your file, or your remote command is ssh home. So more secure way we can do is we need to make sure that we specify that your shell is false when we're using subprocess run or call. Then also, when you're working with temporary files, when you're using OS module, or when you're using temp file or mktemp method in temp file. So these are some of the function or the method that are vulnerable to symlink attack, which replace, right? It can change your temp file to be malicious. So instead of using tempnam here, we can use temp file module functions, or mktemp, we can change it to make stemp, where it is more secure. But it doesn't guarantee 100% security, of course. Temporary files in general is dangerous. So when you use temp files, you just gotta make sure that you are aware that these methods impose vulnerability. Because temporary file methods, it tells you here that it does not give exclusive access to the file, and the file name is guaranteed to be unique, and it uses separate operations, but not the exclusive access is not there. So what can happen is files created in mktemp can open other process, like in this example. Okay. So when we replace the mktemp with mktemp, that remove the capability of opening another process. Because if that file is jeopardized, that file can be used for malware or other intention, and it can launch a process of execution. And that's how they can introduce a malicious file into your system through the temp file. Any question? Okay, so now let's talk about static code analysis. So part of application analysis is also to look at the code, right? And when you evaluate the code, you need to really focus on the areas that would have security issues. So the first thing we should pay attention to is input validation, like what we talked about before. So in the input validation area, it needs to have parsers that detect the rules to make sure that different modules are used securely, especially for the known vulnerable modules. If we're using parsers, we can also implement AST, which is in Python another module, to perform, right, complex queries. We can run the checks and to use the tools to look at how the code is responding. So the base code compared to how the code changes over time, right? We want to make sure that it needs to be detected before it merged for the base code, which is on GitHub. You would see that as your master. To really consider what would be the scale of the complexity, we have to take a look at how these tools can automatically identify the security issues. So with the benefit of Python, right, we can think about how instead of manually search through the code and can cause human mistakes, we can implement a script to do that. So what are some of the tools that you would find in Python? There is Pylint and DLint. Pylint is used for static code analyzer and it is compliant with PEP 8. It tracks double coding and other things, so Pylint is useful. It also looks at parameters that would be accepted in Python. DLint is a way that we can set rules such as linters to search for certain things that would indicate security issues. And it works with Flake 8. So here I put a link for you so you can find information about PEP 8 and Flake 8. Okay. Now for the AST module, this is used to parse code in Python. All you have to do is specify the path of the code and you need to install Bandit. Bandit used to test plugins. So Bandit is a package that you can use. It's a software tool where you can specify, right, what kind of things that you would test, like OpenVAS test plugins. Okay. So AST module, or it uses Bandit, and Bandit is a package that would test plugins. And in the chapter, it gives you screenshot and example of how Bandit is used with the user interface. For backdoor, you can use Pypi, and sometimes that can be on certain websites, or it could be for certain applications. And Pypi simply execute arbitrary code similar to other tools to detect backdoors. And then lastly, we have URL lib3. This is for denial of service detection. It is commonly used for that. So when you have scanners that that scans for denial of service, which is a pattern like of a group of activities that's happening, right, as a flood, then it's able to do that. So those type of application uses URL lib3 in Python. And you have a link to the GitHub there. So in the assignment after number 8, we can answer 9 and 10. So in analyzing static code, you can detect potential issues by using methods to detect the lack of input validations and parsers to implement the rules for detection. And that's more of just like a generalized statement, right? We do see some tools that would support parsers, and we do see some tools that support input validation. So you have a mixed variety of tools in Python to implement both. But knowing that those tools also generate security issues. So in code analysis, we can't have that running forever and on and on. In the case that if those tools impose some security risk. And for Pylint and DLint, you can grab that from the notes. And again, Pylint is used to analyze and check for double code and other things. So they run arbitrary, right, code to analyze your script. DLint just set rules, and that those are parsers to indicate what can be evaluated on the base code. Now, you do see some applications, third-party applications that will do code analysis, and simply they write that into an application to utilize some of these open source library. Or you can manually do this, right? So we can have a script to analyze other scripts or code. Any question? And on the rest of chapter 10, I think the last section, it talks about Flask. And like I said before, we will add that on to chapter 11. Okay. And then we will address Flask framework and how that can be used. Okay, so let's see on here. Any question regarding 10? No question. Okay, so I have some time, so I want to spend a little bit of time to address the lab from last week, right? Challenge with Nessus and OpenVAS is that sometimes connection can be unstable and so you have to restart and reinitiate some of the service and making sure things are in place. So let me open up my VirtualBox and so I can run it and show you. And also just a reminder, if you didn't catch that at the beginning of class, on Wednesday, you don't have to log into Zoom live for our lab. I plan to have the recording for you so you can do your lab, as I have to attend program advisory meeting right after my 3 o'clock class. So it's gonna go until 4:30 and I think the meeting starts at 4:30. So it's gonna go from like 4:30 till like 6:30 or 7 o'clock. So I will miss a big chunk of the class if that's the case. So I will have the recording for the lab for you, unless notified otherwise, right? Okay, so yeah, let's wait for it to boot. So I'm running Ubuntu 22.x, which is the latest version. I ended up not reusing my old Ubuntu virtual machine because it was running out of space anyway. So I recreated a virtual machine and I used the latest version. The Nessus portion of the lab, so let me go and open up the document so you can see. So I modified quite a bit since, you know, so the part 1 or part A with Nessus should work fine as it is modified. You just gotta make sure that you add the firewall rule. And if you're using Kali, just making sure that if you have the firewall enabled on Kali, make sure that you add the port number, okay? And I'm writing this instruction using Ubuntu, so. Now, when you run scripts on whether Nessus or OpenVAS, make sure that your session in the browser is ended, meaning that if you're scanning something, make sure that you close it out or you terminate the process. Otherwise, when you're running additional script to rescan, if your session is enabled, it will not allow a second session to take place. Okay, so for example, like if I have too many requests submitted for VAS or Nessus, it will time out. Okay, so I'm going to address part B mostly because I think I hit part A in last week's lab. So the steps that's involved in this is first you have to clone. Okay. So it's gonna load for a second there. So you're gonna clone this from Greenbone. Then you are going to push updates. You must install SQLite. I had to check like 3 times to make sure, otherwise it doesn't work. Then you're gonna install OpenVAS, which is the application itself. And then you have to restart the service. Then you start the application. Then you go through the setup. Okay. But you must enable 2 ports. 2 listening ports on Greenbone is going to be 93 and 92 and 93 and 90. Okay. So I already have everything working, but let's say that I go back and I want to check. So first thing I would do is, let's say that I already cloned, I already installed, right? I would start with step 25 at the bottom here. Like I want to say here. Okay. If you already installed, it should tell you that it's already been satisfied, so it won't install again. Okay. So I would start with like the last 3 commands here. Okay. So I would do that for you now. What's it? Service OpenVAS Manager restart. Okay, so now the element of the interface with the user is the OpenVAS manager. Then I would do a sudo OpenVAS, and that will be a -start. Okay, and this takes a few seconds for it to go. And if you're not receiving any error here, that means that it starts service. Okay. And then I would do a sudo OpenVAS. No, I always type with me. Setup. And we want to run this to make sure that we pass our validation for our certificate. And it needs to connect, because it's a web application, it still needs to connect to the greenbone.net. Okay. So here it tells me that my certificates are okay. And this will be like, now in the case where if it, you open the browser and it times out, it's because of this step, it's not able to connect. Okay. So I would make sure that I check my network connections, right? I'm on NAT. I didn't really change anything on this. So as long as I have internet connection, and so just gotta make sure that it connects there. Now, if you have a firewall, if you don't enable those ports, it's gonna kick it back. So that will be the next step here. Okay. So if you're using Ubuntu, you have to use UFW, and you can add the ports. Okay. So on Kali or other release, like if you're using Arch, just make sure that you look up information on how to enable port on the firewall. So it's going to use 2 port, 93 and 92. Okay. And it just simply connect to the HTTP side of their of Greenbone. So this will take a little bit, and sometimes it take a few minutes here. So since I've already added the port, and if you did add the port and you try to add it again, it's going to say checked and it's skipped. It's not going to re-add the port twice. Now, if you're getting some kind of error, you can do the rebuild, which I ended up doing at first, and do the check system setup. And then I repeated step 25 or half of step 25 and 26. Okay. My is listening to me. Okay. So now I wanted to show you, let me see if it's, see, network is unreachable. And that's also on their side too. Okay. Connection timeout. Let's see, because I tested this at home and it was totally fine early this morning. So we got 0.8 but here. Okay. So here is my manager, right? All you have to do is simply put in your loopback address and then your port, which is 9392. Now, before I could log in, I have to make sure that I created the user. So let me go back to the terminal and then let me see if I can. And sometime if something is already using it, it's not going to let you reconnect it again. So it looks like I'm installing here. So in order to log in, you have to create a user account. It doesn't come with the admin default. So I wrote down the instruction. In order to create the user account, you have to elevate your privilege to the root. Now, if you're using Kali, OpenVAS is already there from what I read with the Kali documentation. So all you have to do is you would make sure that the ports are added, and then you would go to step 28 and you would start here. You would want to make a user account, right? And then set the password for that user. And then you would manage the certificates. And you can just launch a Firefox application, or just open the browser and put in the loopback address. Let me see, is this connection timeout again? So I made a user. See if it can log in. So even though on the terminal side, it did say that on the green bone, right? It's still able to let me load the dashboard. Okay. However, it might not be able to pull some of the plugins if it's not able to connect to the Greenbone server. So it would look something like this, and then it tells me some of the issues here that it's missing some of the things. And so I would need to go in and set up, right? It's not fully configured. So if I want to set up the NBTs, I can do that, which are just for the plugin scans. And then, then some configuration for my targets and my port list and so on. So now, like for the local system, this is my EAS. I did have an admin account. Let me see if it will log me in there. Now it just logged me out. So let me see. Maybe not. Yeah. So with this, it shows that the user created the password. So right? And the default password was that. So we can simply use this, copy and paste it, and then change the password or reset a new password. I tried running the terminal, but it could not parse the URL. The URL looked like this. Okay. So you were trying to scan that particular URL? So Michelle, I would recommend if it's not able to read that, Have you tried looking at the IP address for that particular site? Yeah, so I would run, I think if the URL is really lengthy or it past a certain point, like, because I see that it is a child of a bunch of other, yeah, it's like grandchild of a bunch of other things. So, and then it has some extension there. So, and also the new browser scrambled the URL, so it might not be able to traverse. So I would find like the actual IP address for it. You can also do like trace route, who is, a lot of different things, and then use the actual IP with the port number, because it's not able to parse it in that, you know, maybe you're using a certain port from that. I know port 80 is open, but there, you know, you can scan it for what's opening port there. So I would use an IP address instead of the complete URL, because sometimes URL like this would be difficult to use. Okay. So if you have everything set up, right? I redid this like 3 times. Okay, you should be able to set up multiple user account, and whatever that you use in those account, you can plug it into here. But remember, before you run your script, you have to close out your session, like log out, you know, from the browser, close the browser, and then run your script, because what it does is going to create another session. And the first time that you use the browser, you have to, you know, click on advance and then accept the risk, just like for the Nessus. Otherwise, it would not accept the SSL certificate, as it requires like additional security there. Okay. So let's come back here. I don't know why it did time me out there. It should be fine now, right? Because once in a while you do get that, like you log in as a user, and then if it loses connection, it's gonna time out. So I am on SVIS user, and then I would be able to, it's not the best on my virtual machine, but I will be able to set up tasks or use different things here. And then you can make other user accounts and stuff. So whatever you can do on the application with the browser here, right? Ideally, we would be able to put that into Python. So in this script right here, you basically use their module, and then you establish the connection, and you can use the IP address or the local host. So in this case, we're using the local host, which uses the 127.0.0.1. And then we would, here we would use the user task target. It's like how we access this, right? And then see how you can set up task. And then this takes you to the task manager. So these methods allows you to set the parameter on how you want the OpenVAS to run. Okay. And if you run the script and it throws you an error, right, it should tells you what kind of error it is. So if the connection is unreachable, you can try to restart it. It says that GMP does not have the attribute for get configs. Okay. This right here. Okay. So that means that it's not able to find, hold on. Yeah, it's not able to find the method. This right here, because the configs. Hold on 1 second. Let me. And sometime that could be. Let me read their. Go to their documentation real quick. Version 9 for GVM. They did put a thing for it right here. So you have version 7. Are we using version 7? Let me see how far this goes. So, GMP get config. Yeah, it is in their module. Let's see. Okay, so version 8 shows that it's there. Let me share with you on share screen here. So I'm in their documentation because when I first searched for it, right, it took me to their forum and then there was a link that was added. So in this, right, we're simply going to search for the method to make sure that if it's there. Yeah, so it existed in their version 8 and 9. So this get one or many config. So I think that's just a method. So that means that if you're using an older version, possibly it's not there, but if you install, let me see if it has other data. It's in there built in. These are all the functions or the method that you can find. Git configs command. Response. It's not a lot of details there on their stuff. So oh, remote management protocol. Yeah, so that command exists. It shows here version 8. Let me see. MP. Yeah, it should be in 7 as well. So that means that somehow when you install it, it did not bring it through. So let's see. Or when we import it, it doesn't bring it in. Connections, parameter of any type. Oh, that's just their PDF version. Yeah, I think even if you're version 7, I think you should be fine. Hmm. And if you install it, it should be there. Let's see. GVM. You installed this, right? Make sure you do that. I will try to refresh. Okay. Well, I think maybe let me see. Let me see if I can find something here. Python. Maybe there's something on the API that we probably did not. Using GMP. Yeah, we have that. Yeah, let me put this in there. Maybe if you have time, you can take a look at their documentation for GMP. Maybe it's missing something. So you can test it by looking at the version, or if you just run some of their example script and see if you know, if it's still running into issues. If it is, then that probably means that it's not, when you install it, something happened or it's missing something there. Okay. Let me stop.